What if? The greatest encounter you'll ever have after death isn't with God angels or judgment, but with the parts of your soul you tried to forget. Carl Jung, renowned Swiss psychiatrist and pioneer of depth psychology, believed that after death, the soul doesn't just vanish into some eternal rest. Instead, it enters a realm of symbols, images, and archetypes, universal forces that live deep within the human psyche. And here's the unsettling part. The first thing you might face is your own shadow. Jung described archetypes like the shadow, the anima, and animus, the wise old man, and ultimately the self, not as fictional characters, but as ancient patterns of meaning buried in all of us. These aren't just psychological theories. They're energetic forces that shape your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, and perhaps your soul's journey after death. Now imagine this. After your final breath, you don't rise to pearly gates or fiery punishment, but instead find yourself face to face with a part of you that holds everything you denied, repressed, or refused to acknowledge. What would you see? Would you feel peace, or would you run from your own reflection? Nice. This isn't fantasy. For Jung, it was the natural conclusion of a life unfinished, soul meeting itself in full, whether it was ready or not. So the real question isn't what happens after we die. The real question is, are you ready to meet what's been waiting inside you all along? Because if Jung was right, the afterlife isn't about escape. It's about reckoning. Let's dive into the archetypes that may be waiting for you, and why now, more than ever, it's time to prepare. Carl Jung never believed that death was the end. In fact, he saw it as a profound continuation, a final chapter in the story of the soul. Not a flat line, not an ending, but the culmination of everything you've lived, avoided, suppressed, and become. According to Jung, our journey through life isn't just about collecting experiences or achieving success. It's about moving toward something deeper, toward wholeness, a process he called individuation. Now, individuation sounds complex, but the idea is simple. It's the lifelong unfolding of your true self. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about uncovering the person you were meant to be, all along the one that exists underneath the masks, the trauma, the conditioning. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Jung believed that death doesn't interrupt that process, it completes it. In his view, death was not an escape from the psyche, but an encounter with it in its purest, most symbolic form. You see, Jung didn't think of the soul's post-death journey in literal religious terms. He didn't talk about pearly gates or hellfire. Instead, he envisioned death as a psychological event, a symbolic experience, where the contents of your unconscious finally rise into full view. And how do these contents appear? Through archetypes. Now, what are archetypes? They're not just characters in mythology or Jungian jargon. They are fundamental patterns of the human psyche, blueprints of the soul that exist across all cultures and time periods. We meet them in dreams, in stories, in rituals, but most powerfully, we meet them in ourselves. Archetypes aren't random. They appear in our inner world during key moments of transition, birth, crisis, transformation, and yes, death. To Jung, archetypes become the soul's final gatekeepers. They're not there to punish you. They're there to reflect you. Because the truth is, you can't lie to an archetype. They don't care what image you projected to the world. They don't care about your job title, your followers, or your philosophies. They reveal the parts of you that are still split, still hidden, still yearning to be brought into the light. And this is why Jung believed they appear after death. Because death for him wasn't just a moment, it was a mirror. the most honest mirror your soul will ever stand before. Imagine this: you take your last breath. The world goes silent, and what greets you is not a being outside of you, but within you. The shadow, the wise old man, the anima, the self. Each archetype arises not as a punishment, but as a test of integration. The shadow, for example, holds everything you refuse to face in life: your repressed anger, shame, fears, judgments. If you never integrated your shadow while alive, Jung believed it would confront you after death, not as a threat, but as a final invitation to wholeness. The anima, or animus, your inner feminine or masculine, appears to restore balance, guiding your soul to reclaim what was lost or neglected in your emotional and intuitive life. The wise old man, or wise woman archetype, may arise next, acting as a spiritual teacher, holding up a mirror of truth. Not to judge, but to ask, did you listen to your inner wisdom, or did you only follow noise? And finally, if you've done the work, if your soul has walked the path of integration, if you've faced the shadow, embraced your emotional truth, listened to the quiet guidance within, then you meet the self. The self is not a being. It is the center, the divine core, the symbol of total unity. It's the temple Jung described in his near-death experience, the final home of the fully awakened soul. But here's the thing. Jung didn't say this process was automatic. He didn't believe everyone simply passed through. He believed that death only reveals what was already within you. If you avoided your inner life, if you lived on the surface, disconnected from your soul's depth, then the archetypes you meet after death may feel alien, overwhelming, even terrifying. But if you lived consciously, if you did the work of inner integration, even imperfectly, then death becomes a sacred reckoning, not a punishment, not an end, but a transformation. Jung's idea wasn't meant to scare us. It was meant to prepare us. He wanted us to understand that the unconscious mind doesn't sleep at death. It awakens. And what it awakens into is the truth you've been building or avoiding your entire life. So let me ask you, if archetypes are waiting beyond the veil, what parts of yourself do you still need to face? Not someday, not when it's too late, but now. Because the more you integrate in this life, the less you fear what comes after. Death, Jung said, is simply the final act of becoming whole. And archetypes are the stages, the guides, the mirrors along the way. If Jung was right, if death is not the end, but a symbolic transition, then what exactly do we encounter on the other side? According to him, we don't just float into some generic light or drift off into endless sleep. Instead, we are met by forces, not angels or demons in the traditional sense, but something far more personal, something deeply embedded in our own psyche archetypes. These are the core patterns that shape the human experience across all cultures, ages, and lifetimes. And Jung believed that in the moments after death, they don't just fade away. They rise to meet us. But not as strangers. They are us. Let's explore the 4 primary archetypes Jung believed could appear in the final chapter of the soul's journey, each one acting as a test, a guide, and a mirror. 1. The shadow, the one you tried to forget. This is the first and perhaps the most confronting archetype. The shadow is everything you didn't want to admit about yourself. It's your anger, jealousy, guilt, shame, unresolved pain. Everything you denied, suppressed, or projected onto others. Most people try to outrun their shadow their entire life. But after death, there's nowhere left to hide. Jung believed that the shadow may be the first archetype the soul encounters because it represents the raw truth of who we were when no one was watching. You might not see a monster or a demon, You might see yourself a version of you you've buried so deep, you barely recognize them. The purpose isn't to punish you. It's to ask, can you face the truth of your own being? Can you finally integrate what you once rejected? Until you face the shadow, the journey cannot move forward. Vashishaunok, anima, animus, the inner lover you never knew. If the soul moves through the shadow, the next guide might be the anima or animus, depending on your gender identity and psychological makeup. These archetypes represent your inner opposite. The anima is the feminine soul image in men. The animus is the masculine soul image in women. Though for non-binary or transgender individuals, the experience may be more fluid and symbolic. The anima animus is not about gender. It's about balance. Throughout life, we often suppress the qualities associated with our opposite. A man might repress sensitivity, vulnerability, emotional depth. A woman might suppress assertiveness, logic, or independence. But after death, Jung believed the anima animus appears to guide the soul toward wholeness, offering a path back to internal harmony. This archetype may appear as a mysterious figure, a dancer, a warrior, a stranger with eyes you somehow recognize. Their presence asks, did you embrace the full spectrum of your being? Or did you live divided from your inner counterpart? To move beyond this gate, you must say yes to both sides of yourself. 3. The wise old man, woman, the inner teacher, returns. If the soul integrates its shadow and reconciles its inner polarity, another archetype may appear, the wise old man or wise woman. This is the teacher archetype, the mystic, the elder who sees beyond ego and illusion. But here's the twist. This figure is not external. It's your own inner wisdom made visible. You may see a monk, a grandmother, a guide you once dreamed about. They speak very little, but their presence radiates knowing. Jung believed this archetype tests the soul's level of awareness. Not IQ, not how many books you read, but your ability to listen to the quiet truths inside. The wise old man or woman may ask, did you live your own life or someone else's version of it? Did you follow the noise or the whisper within? This archetype doesn't lead by force. It leads by reflection. If you've ignored your inner voice, you may not recognize them. But if you've followed your soul, they will feel like home. Balma Sephur, the self, the final union. Beyond the shadow, beyond polarity, beyond the teacher, there's one final archetype, the self. This isn't your ego. It's not your personality. It's not even your higher self in the casual New Age sense. The self is the center of the psyche, the total integration of all your parts. It's the divine blueprint of your being. It's the temple Jung saw in his own near-death experience. To Jung, the self is not something we become. It's something we realize after facing every mirror along the way. Meeting the self is not a reunion. It's a homecoming. But here's the profound truth. Only the soul that has faced the shadow, embraced the anima or animus, listened to the wise guide, can stand in the presence of the self without turning away. Because to meet the self is to stand in the full light of your soul with nothing left hidden. No masks, no roles, only truth. So now let me ask you, which archetype would appear to you first? The one you've avoided most, the one you've glimpsed but never truly embraced? And more importantly, if you died tonight, would you meet them with fear or with recognition? Because the work of meeting these archetypes doesn't begin after death. It begins now. Every dream, every emotional trigger, every relationship struggle, these are invitations from the archetypes to wake up, to integrate, to remember who you are. And the more you do that now, the more peaceful your final encounter may be. By now, you've learned what Carl Jung believed about archetypes and why they may appear to us in the final moments of life. But here's the part that's both eerie and strangely comforting. People all over the world, regardless of culture, religion, or belief, have described near-death experiences that mirror Jung's theory almost perfectly. Not in symbolic language, but in stories, in visions, in moments that changed their lives forever. Let's explore some of them. The light at the end of the tunnel. An archetype in disguise. One of the most commonly reported experiences during near-death episodes is seeing a light, a soft, radiant, non-threatening light at the end of a dark tunnel. But this isn't just a light bulb in the distance. People say it feels alive, conscious, intelligent, loving. Many say the light seems to know them completely. It holds no judgment, but it sees everything. Some describe being absorbed by the light, like it's a mirror of their deepest truth. Jung would likely argue that light isn't external. It's a symbol of the self, the final archetype, the soul's integrated center, the place where all dualities dissolve. But the light doesn't always let people in right away. Just like Jung's temple vision, there's often a pause, a reflection, and sometimes a test. And the mysterious teacher, the wise old man, returns. Another powerful pattern. The sudden appearance of a guide, often described as a teacher, an older man or woman, or even a divine being dressed in robes. What's interesting is this. These teachers rarely lecture. They don't say you passed or you failed. Instead, they ask questions. Questions that go straight to the core of your being. One man reported that during cardiac arrest, he found himself standing in front of an old man with piercing eyes, who simply asked, "Why did you stop listening to yourself?" Others have met versions of themselves, aged, scarred, glowing, who gently revealed long-forgotten childhood memories, unfinished grief, or even moments of kindness that they had underestimated. These are not random hallucinations. They align precisely with Jung's wise old man-ish woman archetype, the soul's inner teacher appearing when the ego has finally stepped aside. The question is, would you recognize that teacher if they appeared to you? Kyber the shadow's appearance. When you face yourself, perhaps the most chilling and transformative reports come from those who didn't see light. At least, not at first. Some near-death experiencers describe being trapped in a void, a space of disorientation, confusion, or emotional pain. They felt overwhelmed by regret, confronted by images of things they did or didn't do, moments they ignored, people they hurt, emotions they buried. One woman said she was shown her own bitterness, not as a memory, but as a living, breathing version of herself, twisted, clenched, angry. She said it wasn't a demon, it was her, without masks. That's the shadow. It doesn't come to punish, it comes to complete the work you avoided in life. And according to Jung, this is not just possible, it's necessary. Because the soul cannot move into integration without first confronting its division. So, what about you? This is where we shift from theory to you. If today were your last day, if the veil were lifted and you stood face to face with a guide, a light, a mirror of your own soul, would you be ready, or would you feel regret? Not because you didn't do enough, but because you didn't become enough of who you truly are. Ask yourself. Have you faced your shadow? Or are you still hiding from your pain? Have you listened to your inner voice, or only followed the noise of the world? Have you reconciled with your emotional truth, your anima or animus? Have you lived as your full self or just a fraction? These are not abstract questions. They are the very questions the soul may be asked after death. But here's the grace. You don't have to wait until then. Well, the invitation is now. What if death isn't the enemy? What if death is the moment the soul finally speaks truth to itself? And what if the archetypes Jung described are not future beings to fear, but present invitations to evolve, because every time you choose to sit with your sadness rather than numb it, every time you forgive someone even when your ego resists, every time you speak your truth even if your voice trembles, you are meeting the archetype now before the afterlife. That is individuation in motion. That is soul work. That is how you begin to prepare for whatever comes next. So the question remains, if you were to meet yourself today, the full, unfiltered spiritual version of you, would you be proud or would you feel like a stranger? Let this video be a reminder, not a warning. You're not late, you're not broken, you're not behind, but you are being called by something deeper, by something ancient, by the archetypes that live in you, waiting patiently to be met. So, are you ready? Carl Jung didn't believe that death was a judgment from above. He believed it was a mirror, a symbolic encounter with everything within us we never dared to fully face. The journey after death, he said, is not measured by external deeds, but by inner integration. And the archetypes, the shadow, the anima, the wise guide, the self, aren't mythical beings. They are the guardians of the soul's final threshold. They don't test us to punish. They appear to complete the work we left unfinished. So the real question is, will you meet yourself with fear or with peace? Because that meeting is inevitable. But how it feels, that part is still being written by you. If this video stirred something inside you, if a part of you is ready to walk that inner path, then this is just the beginning. Subscribe to this channel to explore more Jungian wisdom archetypes and the symbols that guide our soul home. Comment below. Which archetype do you feel would greet you first, and why? And don't forget to turn on notifications. We're diving next into how to prepare your soul before death. Jung's teachings. Until then, keep looking inward, because that's where the real journey begins.